Hey, 6th grade, Mr. Herzberg here. Today, it is Monday, April 27th, 2020. We're going to be going over Tom Sawyer chapter 10 questions. We're going to read chapter 11. We're going to go over to this week's standard and the journal. Let's get started. Okay, this week's standard is RI.6.3, which is analyzing detail how a key individual, event, or an idea is introduced, illustrated, elaborated in a text. What does that mean? That just means how does the author write something and then express what they're writing or their central idea through examples, anecdotes, or personal experience. How you can, like something you learn from life through a personal anecdote or a personal experience. That's what an anecdote is. It's something that happened to you, okay? So let's go ahead and take a look at this journal and see how we can use that standard this week, how someone expresses themselves. So you're going to be reading this week about, have you ever wondered where breakfast cereal came from? The history of breakfast cereal. Remember the three things we're looking for when we write. We're looking to inform, persuade, or entertain. Inform, maybe entertain in this one. So it's going to tell you a little bit about where the history of breakfast cereal came from, and then you've got 4 questions about the main idea of the passage, how breakfast cereals were 100 years ago, different from those today, why people liked the first breakfast cereal, why people didn't like the first breakfast cereal that was invented, and then finally, why did John Harvey Kellogg what did he invent that revolutionized breakfast cereals? And that's of the Kellogg Company, okay? So again, we're just looking this week at how authors get to their key ideas by using examples and anecdotes, okay? Or historical events. All right, let's go over those Tom Sawyer questions from chapter 10. Why are Tom and Huck so afraid of Injun Joe? They are terrified of him because he is a murderous, unpredictable, violent individual. Why do they decide to swear an oath? They take a blood oath because they both swear they will never tell anyone about what they saw in the graveyard that night, which is, of course, Injun Joe murdering Doc Robinson and blaming it on Muff Potter. What facts to Doc Robinson's murder do Tom and Huck not know about as they flee from the graveyard? Well, they don't know why they were there. They have no idea why those 3 men were there. They also don't know as to the details of Muff Potter, if he was drunk that night or not, how intoxicated was he. And they also don't know the details about the Doc and Injun Joe. They know enough, but not a whole lot. Okay, what is Huck's theory of why the blow to Muff Potter's head probably didn't kill him because he was too drunk? Maybe he was a little too drunk, or that he's got a hard head, something along those lines. What about the howling dog is so terrifying to Tom and Huck? They are superstitious that howling dogs, stray dogs more specifically, mean bad luck, or something bad is going to happen at the person the dog is facing when the dog howls at you. Opposed to if the dog's at your back, that means it's howling at someone else. Okay, and why are they relieved when they realize the dog was not facing them? Because that means something bad won't happen to them. So number 6, what reasons do Tom and Huck each have for fearing they will go to the devil and not to heaven? Because they were in a graveyard when all this bad stuff happened. They're not telling the truth. They witnessed a murder. They witnessed someone get murdered and get blamed for it. All these bad things. Based on what you've learned at the end of this chapter, what punishment does Tom receive, and what had he rather his punishment have been? Aunt Polly doesn't punish him. He comes home and she gives him the, "I'm not mad at you, Tom, I'm just disappointed." She tells him that he's broken her heart too many times, that she doesn't even care. She's given up. And Tom, that breaks his heart because he wants her to care. But he's burned her so many times, she just doesn't. She's worn out. And that hurts Tom. That makes him very upset. This is the feather that broke the camel's back. Of course, that's an expression that means this is the last thing that happened. And if you look at the end, it says here that Becky Thatcher gave Tom his doorknob back. In other words, he is now officially broken up from Becky, and that sends Tom, on top of the fact that he's worried about the murder, Aunt Polly's not mad at him, and now his girlfriend's breaking up with him. What piece of information have we learned about Huck's father, and how does Twain reveal these facts? We learn that Huck's father is a drunk. He does what he wants. He's never in town, and he goes from place to place to place. And he's just a lousy father. And he reveals that by Huck saying, hey, I recognize that shack. My father used to live in that shack, and it's where Muff Potter's been sleeping. Let's get started with Chapter 11. Things I want you to pay attention to today are, I really want you to look at how Tom reacts. Again, every time he gets into trouble, he does something where he imagines he's something else or someone else. He goes someplace else. He pretends he's dead. He wants people to think he's dead. He does this every single time predictably. Let's see if Chapter 11, which is real short, by the way, if he continues this. Chapter 11, Muff Potter comes himself, Tom's conscience at work. Close upon the hour of noon, the whole village was suddenly electrified with the ghastly news. No need of the yet let's try that again. No need of the as yet undreamed of telegraph. The tale flew from man to man, group to group, and house to house. With little less than telegraphic speed, of course, the schoolmaster gave his holiday for that afternoon. The town would have thought strangely of him if he had not. A gory knife was found close to the murdered Doc Robinson, and it had been recognized by somebody belonging to Muff Potter. So the story ran, and it was said that a belated citizen had come upon Potter washing himself in the branch about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and that Muff had actually at once snuck off suspicious circumstances, especially the washing, which was not a habit of Potter's. It was also said that the town had been ransacked for the murderer. The public are not slow in the matter of shifting evidence and arriving at a verdict, but that he could not be found. People on horseback departed down all the roads in every direction, and the sheriff was confident that he could be captured before night. All the town was drifting toward the graveyard. Tom's heart was breaking, and he joined the procession. Not because he was 1,000 times rather go anywhere else, but because an awful, uncomfortable fascination was drawing upon him. Arrived at the dreadful place, he warned his small body through the crowd and saw the dismal spectacle. It seemed to him at an age since he was there before. Somebody pinched his arm. He turned and met Huckleberry Finn. Then both looked elsewhere at once and wondered if anybody noticed anything in their mutual glance. But everybody was talking and intent upon the grisly spectacle before them. Poor feller. Poor young feller. This ought to be a lesson to grave robbers. That old Muff Potter will hang if they catch him. This was the drift of a remark, and the minister then said, It was a judgment, I tell you. His hand is here. Now Tom shivered from heel to head. His eye fell upon the stolid face of old Injun Joe. At this moment the crowd began to sway and struggle, and voices shouted, It's him! It's him! He's coming himself! Who? For 20 voices. Muff Potter! Hello, he's stopped! Look out, he's turning! Don't let him get away! People in the branches of the trees in Tom's head said he wasn't trying to get away. He only looked doubtful and perplexed. Infernal impudence, said a bystander. Wanted to come and take a quiet look at his work, I see. Didn't expect any company, did you, Potter? The crowd fell upon now, and the sheriff came through the ostentatious leading Potter by the arm. The poor fellow's face was haggard, and his eyes showed the fear that was upon him. And when he stood before the murdered man, he shook his head with palsy, and his face in his hands, and burst into tears. I didn't do it, friends, Muff Potter sobbed. Upon my word and the honor, I'd never done it. Who's accusing you? Shouted a voice from the crowd. This shot seemed to carry home. Potter lifted his face, looked around him with a pathetic hopelessness in his eyes, and he saw Joe and exclaimed, Oh, Joe, listen. Promise me you'd never. Is that your knife? And it was thrust upon him by the sheriff. Potter would have fallen if they had not caught him and eased him to the ground. And then Potter said, Something told me if I didn't come back and get. He shuddered and then waved his nerveless hand with a vanquished gesture and said, Tell him, Joe. Tell him it ain't use no more. Then Huckleberry and Tom stood dumb and stared and heard the stony-hearted liar reel off a serene statement. They expecting every moment that the clear sky would deliver God's lightning upon his head, and wondering so long the stroke was delayed. And when he had finished, he stood alive and whole, their wandering impulse to break into their oath and save the poor Muff. His prisoner now life faded and vanquished away, for plainly this mistreatment and miscreant had sold himself to Satan, and it would be fatal to meddle with the property of such a power as that. Why didn't you leave? What did you want to come back here for? Someone in the crowd said. I couldn't help it. I couldn't, Potter moaned. I wanted to run away, but I couldn't seem to come anywhere but here. And then he fell back to sobbing. Injun Joe repeated his statement just as calmly as a few minutes after the inquest, under oath, and the boys, seeing the lightings were still withheld, were confirmed their belief that Joe had sold himself to the devil. He was now become to them the most baleful, interesting object they'd ever looked upon, and they could not take their fascinated eyes from his face. They inwardly resolved to watch him nights with opportunity should offer in the hope of getting a glimpse of his dread master. Injun Joe helped raise the body of the murdered man, put it in a wagon for removal, and it was whispered through the shuddering crowd that the wound bled a little. The boys thought that this happy circumstance would turn superstition in the right direction. But they were disappointed, for more than one villager said, "It was within 3 feet of Muff Potter when the wound bled." Tom's fretful secret and gnawing conscience disturbed his sleep as much as a week after this, and at breakfast one morning Sid said, "Tom, you pitch around and talk in your sleep so much that you kept me awake half the time." Tom balanced and dropped his eyes. "Oh, Tom, it's a bad sign," Aunt Polly said. "What you got your mind on, Tom?" "Nothing, Aunt Polly, nothing." But the boy's hand shook so that he spilled his coffee. "And you talk so much stuff," Cousin Sid said. "Last night, Tom, you said blood. Blood, what is it? You said that over and over again, and you said, 'Don't torment me, I'll tell.' Tell what, Tom? What is it you'll tell?" Everything was swimming before Tom. There's no telling what might have happened now, but luckily the concern passed out of Aunt Polly's face, and she came to Tom's relief. "Without knowing it," she said. "Phew, it's that dreadful murder, Sid. I dreamt about it most every night myself. Sometimes I dream it's me that done it." Mary said she had been affected much the same. Sid seemed satisfied, though. Tom got out of the presence as quickly and plausibly as he could, and after he complained of a toothache for a week, he tied his jaws up every night. He never knew Sid lay nightly, watching, and frequently slipped the bandage free and then leaned his elbow listening a good while at a time, and afterwards slipped the bandage back on place again. Tom's distress of mind wore off gratefully, and the toothache grew irksome and was discarded. If Sid really managed to make anything out of Tom's disjointed mutterings, he kept it to himself. It seemed Tom's schoolmates never would get done holding inquests or dead cats, and thus keeping his trouble present to his mind. Sid noticed Tom was never at a corner at one of these inquiries, though it had been his habit to take the lead in all enterprises. He noticed, too, that Tom never acted as a witness, and that was strange. And Sid did not overlook the fact that Tom even showed a marked aversion to inquests, and always avoided them when he could. Sid marveled, but said nothing. However, even inquests were not a vogue at last and ceased to torture Tom's conscience. Every day or two during his time of sorrow, Tom watched his opportunity and went to the little grated jail window and smuggled small comforts through the murderer as he could get a hold of. The jail was a trifling little brick building that stood in the marsh at the edge of the village. There were no guards afforded to it. Indeed, there was seldom occupied. These offerings greatly helped to ease Tom's conscience. The villagers had a strong desire to tar and feather Injun Joe and ride him on a rail for body snatching, but so formidably was his character that nobody could be found who was willing to take the lead in this matter, so the idea was dropped. He had been careful to begin both of his inquest statements with the fight, without confessing the grave robbery that preceded it. Therefore, it was deemed wisest not to try the case in courts at present. So that's the end of chapter 11. I want to talk to you a quick bit here about an instance here where it said that no drop of blood, as they moved the body, a drop of blood came from the wound. And again, superstition rears its head in this chapter. Again, people in the 1800s, a lot of superstition. Not a whole lot of science to work with, so people just make stuff up to kind of explain the unknown. So the wound bled a little bit, and they felt that that was in the presence of Muff Potter, meaning the guilty party is there who did the cutting and killing. So, but Tom he's wrecked. He's got terrible, terrible guilt about watching Muff Potter go off to jail, and he and Huck won't speak up and say, "Well, we saw Injun Joe did it." So he's sneaking, going to the jail to visit Muff because he feels bad, and giving him like little things here and there to make him feel better. So that's everything. I want you guys to work on the journal and the chapter 11 questions I'm posting. I will see you from 1 to 1:30 today if you have any questions. See you guys tomorrow.